Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to another live stream, and thank you so much for tuning in for another show. Britain, Canada, and Australia just recognized the Palestinian state. France is expected to recognize a Palestinian state tomorrow. Full recognition after an ultimatum has been given to Israel, at least by the British Prime Minister Keir Starmer last month, saying that if they do not reach a ceasefire, they will be recognizing a Palestinian state. What does that all mean exactly, and where things are headed to in relation to the situation in Gaza primarily? Okay, so there were a couple of statements. There were press conferences held by the British Prime Minister and the Australian Prime Ministers in relation to this recognition. The British Prime Minister, in his recognition speech, stated that they again are mentioning the Palestinian resistance and labeling the Palestinian resistance, saying who can and who cannot rule a Palestinian state in future, asking the Palestinian Authority to conduct reforms as well. They want a safe Israel and a viable Palestinian state. The statements that came from the Australian Prime Minister were similar, although less demanding, which is typical because Britain has a bigger role in relation to Palestine. However, the key points, and of course there was statements from the office of the Canadian Prime Minister in relation to this recognition. Is this a game changer? Should we be celebrating the recognition of a Palestinian state? Is anything going to change on the ground? The statements that came primarily from the British Prime Minister were very typical, full of arrogance, neo-colonialist approach, and on the Israeli side rather than the Palestinian side, despite the symbolic recognition. Now, you may ask, well, why did he recognize then? Well, there is public pressure against the British establishment's direct involvement. I'm not talking about complicity or support, no, direct involvement in genocide, in the infanticide, in the destruction against the Gaza Strip. The British Prime Minister didn't mention a single word about Israel's crimes. He didn't have any conditions when it comes to Israel following this recognition. No talks about disarming Israel as a Zionist entity that committed genocide, nothing of the sort. There's a lot of public pressure, and these senior figures would want to portray themselves as actually people who do support Palestinian statehood without really doing anything significant on the ground. Lip service, nothing more than that. Otherwise, there are many other priorities, and there are many ways that they could force the end of the suffering of the Palestinian people if they wish to do that, especially when it comes to the British establishment, which is one of the most complicit and one of the biggest in terms of participation in the genocide in Gaza, whether when it comes to arming Israel, supporting Israel with intelligence, surveillance, everything that they need, leading to this recognition that was full of poison and venom against the Palestinian people and their right to have a sovereign entity and their right to resist occupation. And it did not include anything in relation to condemning Israel and the worst barbaric crime that is being conducted against the innocent civilians inside of the Gaza Strip. However, saying all of that, Israel didn't like the move, neither did the American administration. They didn't like the move because they didn't want anything to be built on this move moving forward. So, for example, you denied what is legally given to people of any nation, right to be free to have access to any human right to resist occupation by all means necessary. You didn't do that. Now that they have a state, could there be something being built up later on this based on the continued Israeli position of not having a Palestinian state, which leads us to Israel. Israel has been threatening with more unilateral actions as a response to the measures being taken now with the recognition of a Palestinian state. And reports now from Benjamin Netanyahu's meeting in the US with the American president that he would be asking Donald Trump to give Israel legitimacy over the western part of the West Bank. So for Israel to be officially the state controlling these areas, like Trump previously recognized the occupied Golan Heights as part of Israel, and like Donald Trump previously moved the embassy to Jerusalem, something that never has been done by any other American president. That was in his first term, showing how loyal he is to Benjamin Netanyahu and to the state of Israel. This is not going to change anything on the ground. Israel is going to continue the genocide up until Israel is met with something that will deter it from continuing the genocide inside of the Gaza Strip. What's happening in terms of recognition, if it's not followed, and we haven't seen it being followed by the relevant actions to stop the entity of terror and denounce Israel as a Zionist entity, is completely a political circus. Nothing more than that. Fooling the people, throwing sand in the eyes of the people, and throwing a lifeline for Israel. The Canadian Prime Minister previously stated that he wanted a Zionist Palestine, a Palestine that will recognize the Israeli Zionist state. They are giving conditions. They have the same colonialist, arrogant, supremacist, racist mentality towards other people. What you need to do, who needs to govern you, who can't govern you, how do you need to be, maybe what the state should be called as well, you know, how many political parties, maybe also how you should educate the population, maybe perhaps. So it's nothing but a big circus. And I mean, if some of you are disappointed, you know, what can I do? That's the reality of things. If something gets built up on it that has the relevant actions, good. But so far, these people, especially this war criminal, Keir Starmer, or Kid Starver, to be more accurate, completely unsubstantiated. Keir Starmer was the same man who legitimized cutting off energy and food of 2 million people back in 2023. It doesn't matter what they do and what they recognize, they will still be Zionists, and they will still be war criminals who are participating in genocide. What Britain needs to do, and Britain has a historic role as the entity that granted what it does not own to people who do not deserve it, is to correct its shameful historical position of the Balfour Declaration, giving the land of Palestine, as if they can or have the authority to, Palestine, to the Zionist militias that came from Europe, and supporting this entity of terror, this supremacist, racist entity to this day, denouncing Israel and apologizing to the Palestinian people, not having these circus-type statements that they're going to be recognizing a Palestinian state without doing anything, and while they're recognizing, spitting and spewing all sorts of venom against the Palestinian people and the Palestinian resistance. That's in relation to the recognition of a Palestinian state. There have been several other developments in the past couple of days. especially in relation to the Israeli Zionist operation inside of the Gaza Strip and the action coming from the Palestinian resistance. For the first time in several months, we've had the Palestinian resistance launching missiles on the entity of terror. 2 missiles from North Gaza. This is something very significant, and this is something very symbolic. Reports said that these missiles came from Jabalia towards the Israeli. Ashdod. Israel said they intercepted one landed in an open area. There was a video showing that landing, but it's not really showing that it landed in an open area, but rather in a populated area, especially after multiple videos again were being published by some in Israel following this attack. This was one of the videos that was published earlier on about this missile landing in the area of Ashdod. So what does that mean, the Palestinian resistance being able to launch missiles against Israel now from heavily destroyed areas? So the reports are talking about Jabalia. Jabalia has been flattened by the Zionist forces. They destroyed everything, all of the houses, everything inside of Jabalia. How comes the Palestinian resistance is capable of launching, in the terms of Palestinian resistance, medium to long-range missiles against the terror state? Well, it shows us several things. Number one, that Israel failed in all of the areas that it claimed it had completed the job in and eliminated the resistance from these places. Yesterday or the day before, we were speaking about the attacks of the Palestinian resistance in Rafah, south, and in the north as well. Now this is coming, missiles being launched from under the rubble against the entity of terror. That shows you that the Palestinian resistance still has the capability to launch missiles against the genocide state, and 2 years of full bombardment, 8 times the equivalent of a nuclear bomb landing on the heads of the innocent people of Gaza, did not stop and will not stop the Palestinian resistance from conducting attacks against Israel. Anyone with an ounce of brain in this country will know that, well, what Benjamin Netanyahu is doing 2 years on isn't effective. They're talking about destroying Hamas completely and completely getting rid of all of the armed resistance in Gaza. They're very far from that. And it wasn't just this. There was also another situation where 10 Israelis were injured, according to reports. Some reports said several of them were killed too, inside of Gaza, as one of their vehicles flipped over, according to them. And more actions coming from the Palestinian resistance against the child-killing terror forces inside of the Gaza Strip. Again, no answer from Benjamin Netanyahu and his government to the Palestinian resistance and its actions inside of Gaza. Now they're facing more recognition, again, regardless of how substantial it is and what will come as a result of this recognition. Many in Israel are calling Benjamin Netanyahu now the father of the Palestinian state, the spiritual father of the Palestinian state, because he is continuing to move on, leading to traditional and strong Israeli allies to recognize a Palestinian state, something that Israel didn't even want, regardless of how symbolic it is. One of the biggest things that happened in the past couple of days is, of course, the defense pact between Saudi Arabia and Pakistan. Many people were talking about, well, is the nuclear gonna be available too? Is it part of the deal? And will Saudi Arabia have access to the nuclear umbrella of Pakistan. Of course, there were multiple hints before that was the case, but now it's coming and becoming more and more clear. Pakistan is saying that its nuclear program can be made available to Saudi Arabia under Defense Pact. We're not talking about nuclear defense or the use of nuclear arms. No, we're talking about the nuclear program, hinting that they could be sending Saudi Arabia nuclear weapons. Now, how far can Saudi go if Saudi Arabia never stated that it has nuclear weapons, but we knew previously, especially after the collapse of the Soviet Union, that, nuclear weapons were being sold in the black market. From a Saudi Arabian perspective, many people wouldn't know that Saudi Arabia actually has long-range Chinese ballistic missiles that are capable of carrying nuclear bombs. This was a recent analysis here about Saudi Arabia's ballistic missile program. In it, they're talking about the DF-3, reports that they obtained Chinese missiles from the 80s, now more advanced ballistic missiles. Previously, it wasn't with the, and mind you, that's from several years back, but briefly talking about this. And now they're having capability to, or access to, more advanced Chinese missiles capable of holding nuclear weapons. And more reports recently about Saudi Arabia actually having missile factories in certain parts, again, without declaring too many things and keeping it confidential as much as possible. So what do we have here? Well, we have a situation where a defense pact happened between Saudi Arabia and Pakistan. There is a nuclear umbrella in case there's a threat against Saudi Arabia. And there is also openness for the nuclear program as confirmed now by Pakistan for Saudi Arabia. That means they're more than happy to give Saudi Arabia or sell Saudi Arabia nuclear weapons. How serious is that, and will it reach that stage? We know that, of course, the nuclear arms, you're talking about deterrence primarily, but in the case of a genocidal, psychopathic, supremacist entity, it's very dangerous, and they're being very shady about it, and there would be serious considerations. Several months back, 3 months ago, there was a war between Israel and Iran. At the time, Pakistan showed Iran its full support and told Iran, we are willing to help you with whatever you need. However, there was a general from Iran, the Iranian National Security Council member, Mohsen Razai, who is also a senior IRGC general. He mentioned something very interesting that wasn't widely circulated in relation to Pakistan and its nuclear power. What did he say? He said that Pakistan will drop a nuclear bomb on Israel if Israel nukes Iran. And he made that statement on June 15th during an interview with an Iranian state media. Pakistan at the time vowed to back Iran, of course, and called for, and still calls for, Muslim unity against Israel. But the fact that Pakistan, at least according to not any person, a very senior figure in the IRGC and also a member of the Iranian National Security Council, Mohsen Razai, a man of his weight in the Iranian establishment, making such statements about Pakistan's willingness to drop a nuclear bomb against Israel if Israel nukes Iran, they are very serious. And they are very serious for multiple reasons. Number one, the fact that Pakistan is willing to use it. Many people are saying, oh, it's primarily as a deterrence for India. No, clearly they're willing to use it. They are not obliged by the no first use policy as well, Pakistan. Secondly, the second very significant thing is they are willing to use a nuclear bomb to defend a country that they do not have a defense pact with. That's a very significant thing. Why? Because, well, it's showing us that, well, Pakistan doesn't necessarily have to have a defense pact with a country to use its nuclear power against Israel, in that case, the main culprit, the main threat to global security, the main entity of terror at the moment, fully backed by the United States administration, in case they conduct any attack against not only Iran, but other countries too. These are very significant developments in relation to Pakistan and Saudi Arabia. And also the IRGC, they're making now more statements and warning Israel of now deadly response in case they will try and have another attack. Iran's Revolutionary Guards have threatened Tehran's enemies with a deadly and exemplary response in the event of any new attack on the Islamic Republic. Why are they saying that now? And why is Iran increasing the tone recently about the threats coming from Israel? Well, the Israeli head of the Mossad was boasting about the fact that they still have many operatives now in Iran and even in the heart of Tehran, and they're also able to conduct operations as and when the Israelis order them to, with Benjamin Netanyahu and multiple other senior figures hinting that the game is not over. As a matter of fact, senior figures in the Israeli establishment said that the second war with Iran is only a matter of time for various reasons. Number one, the attack of Israel failed miserably. Some of them were just shy of confirming it was a failure. Why? Well, because Israel's main aim was to take down the whole establishment, not just attack Iran's nuclear capacities or ballistic missiles. However, they begged the United States to provide them with a ladder to climb down the huge tree that they climbed on. With this theatrical attack against the Fordo, and then Israel and the United States had a bilateral declaration of a ceasefire that Iran didn't even confirm. There were no written confirmations about a ceasefire and agreement. The only thing Iran said is that if hostilities stop against us, we will stop the attacks against Israel. And the final strike came from Iran against Israel, and one of the most destructive ones as well. Therefore, there is no state of peace. There are no written agreements. What we do have is a state of war and a ceasefire that was declared unilaterally or bilaterally by Israel and the United States without the involvement of Iran and without any written document to confirm that there is a ceasefire and how long is that ceasefire valid for and up until when they will continue with this ceasefire, which is a very normal procedure in case of any war. So there are a lot of shifts. The pact, Iran confirming that they're willing to use an umbrella. What is that doing to the process of peace, or what's called the Abraham Accords? Israel was begging Saudi Arabia to enter these agreements. The Saudi authorities told them no peace, no nothing, no normalization unless there is a Palestinian state. Then we've had this recent attack against Qatar. What are the Israelis saying now? The Israelis are reporting that Ron Dermer met with one of the leading figures in the Saudi establishment, the ruling family, telling him that actually we are not now interested in any normalization with you. Because we don't want, and the excuse is we don't want any normalization up until we defeat the Hamas. So why are they saying that, and why is Ron Dermer, Benjamin Netanyahu's #1 aide, the Minister of Strategic Affairs and his main poodle globally, saying that? Well, to show as if Israel is the one that doesn't want this peace treaty, rather than it being buried now with the defense pact that happened between Pakistan and Saudi Arabia. So where is everything going to exactly? We have more recognition of a Palestinian state, we have more defense pacts, and we have Israel declaring and confirming there will never be a Palestinian state. Benjamin Netanyahu made multiple statements. There will never be any Palestinian state, neither with Hamas nor with the Palestinian Authority, not even a demilitarized state. They're not accepting anything. And they are conducting attacks against all other countries. Where is that leading to? That is going to lead inevitably to more escalation. It would only be a matter of time up until more countries enter the ring of fire against Israel. And these were the main things that I wanted to share with you in this live stream. I'll hopefully have multiple segments and be with you with another either live or video tomorrow. In the meantime, stay blessed, take care, and I will see you soon in the next video. Peace, everyone. Salam.